Hi Russell, welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to be talking about the novelisation of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. An absolutely wonderful book. I got through this in about 3 days. I just zoomed right through it and it was wonderful. Now, the one thing you should definitely know about this is that even though it is based off the movie, only half of this book is actually of the movie in the book. The rest of it is events that surround the book, that surround the movie. There is a lot that's going on in this book that isn't in the movie, and those were the parts that I thought were the best. Such great. For those of you who don't know, it details the final moments of the golden age of Hollywood around early to late 1969. Obviously, if you're watching this video, then you've probably already seen the movie. The movie takes place over 2 days and then a final night 6 months later. What's interesting is that this book here only takes place over the 2 days and not that final night 6 months later. So it's technically does not cover the entirety of the movie, even though events in this book succeed the movie's time period and precede it as well. And it involves the characters of Rick Dalton, Cliff Booth, and the real actress Sharon Tate, who was taken down pretty much in that massacre from the Manson family. The book itself it's both linear and non-linear. Like it starts off one day and then proceeds into the next day, but in between it's chopped up and it just keeps going back and forward in time, back and forward in time. And also, one thing you should also note about this book is that it is packed to the rim with references. I mean, there are so many references. The first chapter, which I actually thought was probably the hardest part of the whole book to get through, not because it was difficult to read or anything like that. It's just that he just comes out the gate right there and just throws reference after reference after reference of pop culture from the 1950s and the 1960s. I'm well versed in that time period, but even there was stuff in there that I was like, what the hell's going on? And it just keeps on just building and building and building. So that first chapter is it's a tough one to get through, but then once you get through that, it gets into its own rhythm and just proceeds along. So a bit of a shaky start, but an overall great book to read. And one thing you should also note is that a lot of the scenes that are in the movie have been changed for the book, including certain dialogue. So a scene could be the same in the book as in the movie, but certain words have been tweaked. Like the dialogue is not quite the same. For example, there's a moment during the Bruce Lee monologue and fight between him and Cliff Booth, when he's talking to Cliff Booth, and before that there's just certain words that have been changed. So there's little things like that you pick up on, and that itself is in the book, and it's a wonderful scene as well. Some of my favourite moments in the book don't even appear in the movie, and that includes a wonderful section which details how Cliff Booth got his beautiful dog Brandy. And Cliff Booth, even though he's presented as a supporting character in the movie, he's sort of amped up to what I consider to be a main character in the book. In fact, there's so much of him in the book, he almost overtakes Rick Dalton, who was the main character in the movie. Sharon Tate's passages are few and far between, but she's got just enough time as well. And there's even moments with Charlie Manson as well, and his followers, particularly one by the name of Pussycat, who has this really, really creepy chapter in the first 100 pages. So basically, him and a couple of others sort of don't break into the house. Well, she does, but they go to this rich couple's home, and they're all standing there just on the lawn, just watching her break into the house. And she breaks into the house, strips naked, and sort of does her own crawl. She goes on fours and she crawls around the place, crawls up the stairs, goes into the bedroom where the old couple is sleeping. And while this is all happening, you got these interspersing dialogues where you think it's Manson actually directly talking to her, but it's all in her head. And that just shows just how much he's dug into these girls that he's brought into this cult. That's how much he's sort of put himself into their mind, is that they now think of him talking to them like that. And it's really disturbing, really distressing, and absolutely mesmerizing. I was shocked when I read it. And it ends with her jumping on the bed, waking up and starting them, and then running out the door and running down the hill and through the neighborhood with Manson and all that. And that's one of the many chapters there that just completely took me by surprise. But the chapter in which Cliff Booth got his dog, I think, is the highlight of the book. It's absolutely wonderful. And it starts with a man who owes Cliff money, and he instead comes along with this dog in the back of his car in a cage, pretty much just cramped up in the back of the car, and he says that he's going to put this dog into fights all around Los Angeles and the counties. And if Cliff Booth wants to get in on it, they'll slowly make more and more money with each preceding fight until they get to that 10th fight where he will have paid him back the money he owes plus extra. They'll make an absolute fortune off it. And for a while he goes along with it. They do 6 or so fights, 7 or so fights, and they make quite a good money off it. But then it becomes clear to Booth that this dog is not going to last, that it's going to die eventually, especially when the prize money goes up because the dogs get more and more vicious. And this leads to a confrontation in his trailer with the man who brought the dog over in the first place, and it leads to him killing him and then adopting the dog as his own and promising the dog that he will never let it fight again. So it's quite beautiful and all that. There's also references to Rick Dalton, who throughout the book is pretty much on the set of the lot filming Lancer. You see in the movie where he's... he acts out, he's crying, he's angry, just in the split second he does that. Well, it's made more clear in the book that he's considered to be undiagnosed bipolar, so you get more of a backstory to him. But honestly, this book seems to be more interested in how Cliff Booth runs and operates, including talking about how he murdered his wife, talking about what he did during World War II, and in particular moments after World War II, such as when the war finished, he went to Paris and hung around there for a while, and was actually considering becoming a pimp. And there's a whole section dedicated to that, which is quite a funny and interesting section as well. There's also the moments where the book fast forwards in time to when they're shooting on location in Europe, and they're in Spain. I can't remember what film they're filming. It's one of the 3 or 4 that's mentioned in the movie. And Cliff Booth is walking past the door, and he sees veteran actor Aldo Ray, a real-life actor who was known for being an extraordinarily heavy drinker, so much so that they had to just have it in his contract that he was not allowed any alcohol in his hotel rooms. The alcohol had to be taken out of the hotel rooms at all times, and he always had to be put under watch before he filmed his scenes. And he gets into this wonderful conversation. They get into this great conversation in the middle of the night, just them two sitting there. And it ends with Cliff going back and getting a bottle of alcohol and bringing it to him, and he gets taken off the movie the next day because he was drunk. And there's other characters as well that are real life that show up in the book, including Steve McQueen, who has a wonderful conversation with Rick Dalton towards the end of the book when Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski throw a party. And that would be the end of the second night, just before he gets the call, or after he gets the call to fly out and shoot the movies in Europe. And the ending is also quite well structured. So after he meets Steve McQueen out the front there, going to the party, he gets a phone call at like something like midnight, and it turns out to be the girl that he acts alongside with in the Lancer project that he was in earlier that day. And it's a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful piece of connection between the two as they go over lines for their acting scene in the next day, and it's really well done, and it ends on a hopeful note. It really, really does. There is absolutely no mention of the what you call the shootout or the big fight scene at the end. When people talk about the movie, they talk about that final fight scene, but it is referenced. It is referenced in the first 100 pages in 2 lines. And there's never spoken of again. So Quentin Tarantino obviously doesn't want to make the book about that. He wants to make the book about other stuff as well. And I appreciate that. I know there'd be a lot of people who read the book and they just want to flip straight to the end to read that chapter dedicated purely to violence. But I don't mind. I think it was quite a fascinating way to do it. There's also the girl who also spoke to Rick at the end of that book. It's mentioned that she goes on to star in a Quentin Tarantino movie in the late 1990s, and she gets nominated for an Academy Award for it. It's a fictional movie as well. Tarantino's stepfather Kurt, who was a piano player for certain famous Hollywood bars and pubs in LA, he makes an appearance in this book, and it's in the latter 50 pages of the book where Cliff Booth, Rick Dalton, and I can't remember Jim Stacy, who is the lead actor for the Lancer pick. They go out for a drink, and Kurt joins them. The bartender joins them, and he asks for a photograph for his 6-year-old son, who turns out to be Quentin Tarantino himself. So there's little references like that are dropped in. So it's really well, immaculately put. other things that mentioned, Cliff Booth, a lot of it, yeah, to do with Cliff Booth. He likes Marvel comics, he likes foreign films. At the start of the book, when Rick Dalton goes to the office of Marvin Shores to talk about the projects that he will be doing in Europe, or at least persuade him to do it. Cliff Booth pretty much hits on the lady behind the desk and invites her out to see a foreign film with him. And that's also one of the scenes that are different from the movie. In the movie, they meet Marvin Shores at a restaurant, but in the book starts with them meeting at a talent agency. And yeah, there's things that have changed like that. Another great scene involves when Cliff Booth goes to Spartan Ranch and talks to George, and then there's that creepy girl who's in the house. And they do have a conversation, at the door, where he's pretty much threatening to break it in if he's not allowed in to go see him. But then there's also another conversation that happens after he meets George. And it's things like that I wish he'd put in the movie, because I think it would have really spiced things up a bit. As it stands, I'm a big fan of this book. I think it's very well written, and I honestly do, trust me when I say this, don't go into it thinking it's just a pure novelization of the movie. It is not. Far from it. There is lots of gold here, lots of gold to be dug out. And the conversation, as a writer, his paragraphs and descriptive wordings, they're not the best. They're average. Okay, he doesn't draw things out and describe them in great detail. But you don't read a book written by Quentin Tarantino for that sort of thing. You read it because of the dialogue. You want to read it because of how characters talk to each other. And that is the best part of this book. That is where it really comes into its own, is when characters get into monologues and when they out-talk one another, and you just feel like you're not in the conversation, but you're sitting next to these characters just talking over one another and talking to each other and just pontificating. A lot of pontificating. So it's, all in all, it's a great start to the year, and I really like this book, and read it, and I hope you do too. Alright, yeah, have a good one, people. See you.